One thing that is an eye roller for just about every journalist, I think, it certainly is for me, is the marketing ploy where you say something over and over and over again so that the customer or the buyer wants your product. But it must work.
Otherwise they wouldn't do it.
Otherwise they wouldn't do it. And they don't just do it on TV commercials, they do it in politics. And one guy that does it a lot is Scott Walker. Just as an example, back in 2017, Phil, at his State of the State speech, he said...
Which everybody's watching the speech, of course, right?
Well, if he says something, I guess 10 times, the reporters will eventually put it in their story. But he said over and over again in 2017, we are working and winning for Wisconsin.
Working and winning.
Yes. In 2018, in his State of the State speech, he said, I do have the count on this, it was more than 10 times.
More than 10 times.
Yes. In a speech that was maybe a half hour, he said, we are getting positive things done for the people of Wisconsin.
As opposed to negative things done for people of Wisconsin.
Yeah. And so, I hear him say that over and over again. I'm like, okay, we heard it the first time.
Your eyes are going to roll out of your head.
Yeah, but it must work, I guess, because
he has won 3 elections.
He's a very successful politician, and he keeps doing it. And he did it last week to some degree at his speech at the Republican convention here in Wisconsin. And today on Center Stage, we're going to talk about his speech. We're going to play some of the clips and the words that he said multiple times, and we're going to make sense of it all.
Make sense of it or make fun of it all?
Well, both, hopefully. This is Center Stage, the Wisconsin State Journal's political podcast from the sensible center of Wisconsin politics. And I am Scott Milfred, the editorial page editor of the Wisconsin State Journal. And with me here is...
Phil Hands, the editorial cartoonist at the Wisconsin State Journal.
We are half of the Wisconsin State Journal's editorial board.
The better-looking half.
So let's, Phil, talk about his speech last week. It was very well received, not surprisingly, at the Republican State Convention.
It had one really good quality about this speech. It was nice and short.
It was.
It was 20 minutes from start to finish, which included an introduction and lots of pauses for applause.
His main theme was stressing that Wisconsin is going to win in the 21st century. That seemed to be his new slogan.
So today, I'm excited to lay out the foundation of our plan for the next 4 years. We call it Wisconsin Wins the 21st Century.
And he said it again.
The bottom line is we want to help the people of Wisconsin win the 21st century.
And he said it again.
The bottom line is that we want to help you, the people of Wisconsin, win the 21st century.
And he said it again.
Let's help the people of Wisconsin win the 21st century. Thank you.
And he also, and part of what he hit on with that theme was the need to keep more millennials here in Wisconsin. I was kind of surprised at how much time he spent, including recounting his own family, his 2 sons who left Wisconsin but came back for jobs.
Maybe someday they'll start families, hopefully.
Yes. That he was really focused on this issue of we're going to keep our young people in Wisconsin, we're going to have good jobs for our young people in Wisconsin so they stay here, and we're going to win the 21st century with our next generation here in Wisconsin.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important topic, especially for Republicans, because we don't see that issue as much in Madison, because Madison is this really cool city that young people actually are moving to and want to be part of. But you hear stories from all over the state where we're from small towns where Trump did especially well in elections,
yeah.
These towns, the young people are leaving them as fast as they can, it sounds like.
One of course, the big issues in this race is Foxconn, the giant manufacturing plant in southeastern Wisconsin from Taiwan that's going to make flat-screen TVs and maybe some other high-tech devices. He did mention Foxconn in here, and that is at least one of the things that fits his version of keeping young people here is he's creating all these jobs like at Foxconn.
Yeah. But I will say the speech, there were some interesting parts of the speech. Overall, I would say it was a big speech about trying to get the Republicans fired up and sort of warning about the things that Democrats will do or take away if they take power in the fall.
By my count, he said the words anger and hatred more than 10 times. Here we go.
Sadly, the left seems to be consumed with anger and hatred. They're angry at me. They're angry at the president. They're angry at all of you. They're angry at anyone who dares to even give support to Republicans here and across the country. Unfortunately, anger and hatred are pretty powerful motivators. Now, we need to counter that. We need to counter that not with more of the same. We need to counter that with optimism and organization.
He actually had been hitting this theme earlier on Twitter and in the media interviews after some of these special elections did not go the Republicans' way.
No, it's been kind of a reoccurring theme, and there's a lot of liberals who seem to say, yeah, we're angry, we're upset, we hate you, Governor Walker, and we're ready to stand up to you. I'm not so sure they're as angry as Scott Walker as they are at Donald Trump.
And speaking of Donald Trump, let's go to the next clip here, where this is the only moment in the entire speech, albeit not that long of a speech, 20 minutes max, where he mentions Donald Trump. Here he goes.
You see, as I travel the state, I hear plenty of people tell me that they're frustrated with Washington. Heck, I'm upset with some of the Republicans in Washington. But so let me be clear today. President Trump and his team, his great team, are moving America forward. The members of the House have passed things like repeal and replace, but the U.S. Senate seems to be the problem.
Now, that was really interesting to me because he's saying, yeah, I know you're upset with Washington, so am I. I'm even upset with some of the Republicans, but
not Donald Trump.
Not Donald Trump.
Because he's doing a great job.
Well, it's an interesting walk on the fence there he's kind of doing, where he seems to be siding with Trump against, I guess, the Republican establishment that's not getting things done.
Those losers like John McCain who vote against repeal and replace.
Well, but the thing is, Walker is an establishment Republican. I mean, and he reeks of establishment. He's been around a long time, but clearly, to me, though, what this says is, as Scott Walker, I am not running away from Trump, given that he's unpopular with a lot of the voters, and Washington is unpopular. I'm going to run against Washington, even though it's controlled by Republicans, and I'm going to run with Trump.
Yeah.
And we'll see if he's going to appear with Trump. You remember there was a little bit of murmurs in the press a few weeks ago that Walker had said something about, I'm not going to appear on the stump with Trump. And then when he was questioned about that, he immediately said, well, yeah, no, I'm happy to appear with Trump.
Well, Trump does have a nice collection of Wisconsin sports jerseys.
Walker's at 47% approval rating, 47 negative right now. So he's right on the edge, I guess you could say. Trump was down at 43 last we checked with the Marquette poll, and half of people disapproved of him, and that was about the highest he'd been in a while. All right, let's go to the clip, which was maybe one of the most exciting parts for the people who were there, where it was the call and response thing.
Scott Walker loves to call and respond. I guess because he's a preacher's son or something like that. But
I see now that I like call and response. I don't like the repeating the same phrase over and over again. But if you can start saying some things and getting the crowd saying something back, I think that's fun for the crowd, and your point comes across. It reminds me of the one I always remember of was when Jesse Jackson, eons ago, said to the Democratic National Convention, "Stay out the bushes."
Stay out the bushes.
Yeah, and he got the crowd repeating that, and it was a really fun kind of phrase for the mostly white delegates to say. But, here we are, however many, 20-some years later, and that still sticks out in my head. So let's roll some of Scott Walker's call and response here.
If a Democrat is elected as governor, we'll likely lose our majorities in the state legislature. If that happens, all of the positive reforms that we have worked so hard for could be gone. Think about it. Record low unemployment. It could be gone. Lower property taxes on working families and seniors, gone. Balanced budgets, gone. Record actual dollar investments in schools, gone. UW tuition freeze. Photo ID to vote. Lower taxes on small businesses. Protection for the unborn and the elderly. Ability to protect yourself and your family from harm. Lower taxes on farmers and manufacturers. Relief from the health care premiums going up under Obamacare. The right to choose if you want to be in a union or not. Collective bargaining reforms in Act 10 that save schools and local governments billions of dollars across the state. The child tax rebate for working parents and grandparents in this state. Requirements for able-bodied adults to be able to work and to pass a drug test before they get welfare assistance. Foxconn's 13,000 good-paying family-supporting jobs, and with it, the likelihood that any other employers would ever come or expand in the state of Wisconsin. All of these reforms could very well be gone after the next election.
The theme of this call and response is gone.
Yeah. What does that mean?
I mean, this is Scott Walker basically saying all the things the Democrats are going to take away from us if they take power. If we don't go out and vote, the Democrats will take all of these things away. Now, I think for the same point, a lot of Democrats say, yeah, we're going to take these away. These are horrible things.
Just a little bit of a reality check here. The odds of a wave wiping out the Republican majority in the state assembly are incredibly low, to some large degree because of redistricting, where they've drawn these districts such that it's going to be incredibly hard for the Democrats to pick up double-digit seats in the assembly and win that. So the best the Democrats, I think, can hope for is a Democratic governor and Senate with a Republican assembly. And the Republican assembly would never let these things go away.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's trying to put a fire under his Republican Party.
Now, I'm not quite sure a Democratic Senate can really do a whole lot about record low unemployment. I mean, I'm not sure this party's done a whole lot for record unemployment. I think that has to do with the larger economic forces, but that's just me.
On a couple of these, I think that you could say, for example, photo ID to vote. That is something probably the Democrats, if they could, would flip very quickly.
I wouldn't mind that either. I'm not sure. I don't think photo ID is a very good idea.
I also suspect property taxes would probably start going up.
They'd be creeping up again.
He's probably right about that, and I think the property tax issue is one of his best issues because nobody likes property taxes. It's the most onerous tax, and it's basically been flat under Walker.
Except for rising housing values.
Couple other, the tuition freeze he's hitting there. I mean, they probably would lift the tuition freeze. It's been in place for, 5 or so years.
We'd call it investing in education.
Yeah. But that's another, what he's hitting here are things that a lot of these are not just popular with Republicans. Across the state, the tuition freeze has been popular.
Yeah, I think it's doubtful. I mean, he says budgets will be gone under a Democratic administration, but I'm not sure how balanced his budgets were to begin with.
Yeah, no, he says lower taxes on small business. He didn't mention no taxes on Foxconn or manufacturers.
He does
in
actually
fact,
say
we give them money when they don't pay taxes.
He actually did say we're going to have lower taxes on farmers and manufacturers. They can't get any lower than nothing.
Well, they do. They don't pay any. Basically, they don't pay any income taxes, state income taxes. They do still pay some property taxes, and they pay sales taxes. But yeah, that one made me raise my eyebrows a bit too.
What's interesting about this little section about gone is that Democrats are always trying to say that the Republican Party is all about God, gays, and guns, right? So if you he's got two little segments here. He says we're going to get rid of Democrats will get rid of protection for the unborn and the elderly. So he throws abortion and euthanasia all into one little category right there, and that's the only mention of abortion of the entire speech. And then he says the ability for yourself to protect your family would be gone, which is the only time that these in theory gun nut Republicans. That's the only time he even mentions something that can be construed as a Second Amendment issue.
Well, and I think what you're getting at here is this is a more moderate message. I mean, he talked about public schools in this speech where his kids went to public schools and he hopes these other kids are going to go to public schools. He didn't ever mention, the state pays for vouchers for kids to go to private schools, and you notice that the Democrats are really hitting that issue. So he must have the polling saying, I'm not going to be pushing the voucher issue in this election. The one issue, of course, he hits there, Act 10 gone. Of course, the Democrats would repeal it if they could. I don't think they'll be able to because the Republicans will still have the Assembly. But I think Act 10 is a winning issue for him. You know, I looked it up today that the number of people who belong to a union in the state, 8.3%. Now that's down from before Act 10, but even before Act 10 in 2010, 14.2% of workers in Wisconsin were in unions. So if Act 10 is going to blunt union power, that's a really big issue here in Madison. But for most people, they're not very concerned about that.
I mean, it doesn't. And a lot of people outstate still think of Act 10 as all those whiny protesters in Madison. So it's an issue that I think plays well with a certain electorate in Wisconsin.
Yeah, and the Democrats in their very populated primary for who their governor nominee is going to be, they are stressing repeal of Act 10 because they need to win a narrow sliver of the Democratic vote.
I'm not sure every single candidate on the Democratic field is saying they will repeal Act 10 on day one.
No, but a lot of them are.
Yeah.
And I guess my point is they're doing that in the primary, but I don't think once they get to the general election, that's going to be a real popular point. Anything else in his list there you want to talk about?
I thought it was interesting that he snuck in that the child tax rebate for working parents and grandparents would be gone if Democrats take over. But that's going to be gone anyway because that's just a one-time deal.
Oh, you're getting ticky-tacky now on his speech. All right, let's do another clip here. I thought this was actually one of his best sections.
Winning in the 21st century starts at home. Looking around this room, many of you have watched Matt and Alex grow up at events like this convention over the years. You might recall that Matt went to Marquette University and Alex went to the University of Wisconsin. Both, like many families, both briefly worked out of the state of Wisconsin. Now, as parents, Tonette and I are proud to tell you today that both Matt and Alex are living and working here in the state of Wisconsin. That's right, they're living and working here in the state of Wisconsin. Now, I don't want them living in my house, and I certainly don't want them in my basement, but we're very glad that they're here. For many of us moms and dads, our American dream is not about owning a business or even a home. It's about seeing our children do well and ideally living close to home.
He must have some polling and be hearing when he's out across the state that that is a really big issue, particularly in rural parts of the state, that they're losing their young people and they want to keep them.
Yeah. Well, I think also it kind of speaks to the fact that he's using the word millennials in sort of a positive light. Usually it's used, I mean, it's often been used derogatory against these, overeducated, whiny little basement dwellers. But he's talking about as a generation. And part of that is that, Republicans and conservatives in general are not doing well with millennials. I think the millennial support for Trump is almost non-existent. And it's hard to win elections if an entire generation of people does not agree with your policies.
It was so not a Trump speech.
No, it's not.
And so he's going to run with Trump, but he's not very Trumpy. I mean, last week we talked about the candidates for U.S. Senate.
Trying to see whose yellow wig can be the biggest, right?
Yeah, and I sensed after Trump won, Governor Walker tried in a couple ways, maybe tried out some Trump sort of statements, but it doesn't really work for him, and I don't think that's what he's going to do. He's sticking with what's worked for him in the past, which is being himself.
I mean, this speech is a speech of somebody who's running as a moderate to be a state leader.
Yeah.
He's running as a moderate this time around. Now, I'm not sure. I mean, he has a reputation for being a hardcore conservative, especially amongst people in Wisconsin on the left. So I don't know if you can put that toothpaste back in the tube, as it were, if he can ditch his conservative credentials and run as a moderate this time around, or have it both ways. You always want to have it both ways.
Do you think the speech worked at rallying the right and waking them up? He said "wake up" several times in here, saying that the Republican Party has to energize. They need to go campaign at the school, at the church, at the neighbor's house to get the Republicans out. Do you think the Republicans are going to do that?
I think the Republicans that are at this convention are going to do that, but he's preaching to the choir at this convention speech, and it's trying to get people that aren't that involved in politics energized. And I think there's a lot of right-leaning people who just aren't feeling very excited right now.
Now you did, Phil, you haven't done a cartoon on this yet, but you did pick up on one sort of peculiar phrase that the governor used in this speech. Let's play it.
We in this state, we are Wisconsin proud.
We are Wisconsin proud.
Yeah.
Which is okay's thing to say, but I would warn Scott Walker he might not be very welcomed at a Wisconsin Pride Parade. The other thing I thought was great in this speech is, Scott Walker talked about all the things that are gonna, even though the left is motivated by anger and hatred, and even though tens of millions of dollars from special interest groups are watching our set against us, I know we can prevail. But the biggest threat to Scott Walker is the dumb things Trump will say.
You can find Center Stage on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and Google Play.